As I pulled into the long, winding driveway of Sarah's parents' mansion, a heavy sense of foreboding settled in my stomach. The sprawling estate loomed ahead, its dark, imposing structure contrasted against the bright autumn leaves that danced in the wind. I parked the car and stepped out, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. This weekend was supposed to be a chance to connect with Sarah's family, to understand the woman I loved a little better. Yet, as I approached the grand entrance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "James, you made it!" Sarah exclaimed, her bright smile lighting up her face as she rushed down the steps to greet me. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I felt a slight easing of my tension. We exchanged a warm hug, and I took a moment to appreciate the way her dark curls framed her face, the way her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yeah, couldn't wait to see you," I replied, forcing a smile despite the unease gnawing at me. As we entered the mansion, I was struck by the vastness of the foyer, with its high ceilings and ornate chandeliers that cast a warm glow over everything. It felt both luxurious and intimidating, as if the walls themselves were keeping secrets. "Mom, Dad, look who's here," Sarah called, her voice echoing through the marble hall. Moments later, her parents emerged from a nearby room. Her mother, a tall woman with a commanding presence, approached with an outstretched hand. "Welcome, James. We're so glad to have you here," she said, her voice smooth and welcoming. I shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the way her eyes scrutinized me, as if assessing my worthiness. "Thank you for having me, ma'am," I replied, doing my best to sound confident. Her father, a stout man with a stern expression, nodded at me, barely masking his skepticism. "Good to have you here," he said gruffly, before turning his gaze away. I noticed the way he seemed to study me from the corner of his eye, as if trying to decipher my intentions. "Dinner will be ready soon," Sarah's mother announced cheerfully, leading us to the dining room. The table was set beautifully, with fine china and gleaming silverware that reflected the candlelight. It felt like an invitation to a royal banquet, but the atmosphere was thick, with an unspoken tension that made me wary. As we sat down, I attempted to engage with Sarah's family, asking about their interests and hobbies. There were moments of laughter, but they felt forced, like a game we were all playing. I couldn't help but notice the furtive glances exchanged between her parents as I mentioned my photography career. "Photography, huh? That's interesting," her father said, his tone bordering on dismissive. "You must capture a lot of perspectives." "Yeah, I like to explore different angles," I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. But I felt the weight of his gaze, as if he were probing deeper than the surface. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, and I could sense her unease. "James has a unique eye for detail," Sarah interjected, her voice slightly strained. "He's got a knack for finding beauty in the ordinary." "Ordinary?" her mother scoffed, a hint of skepticism in her voice. "Beauty can be quite subjective, can't it?" Just then, a loud bang echoed through the house, causing everyone to jump. The sound came from down the hall, followed by an eerie silence that hung in the air, stacked thick and suffocating. My heart raced as I glanced around the table, but everyone's expressions were carefully masked, as if they were all in on a joke that I was not privy to. "What was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed my nervousness. "Oh, it's probably just the wind," her mother said quickly, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "Old houses can be quite creaky." But the way she said it felt rehearsed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. "Yeah, the wind," Sarah echoed, her eyes darting toward the hallway. "Let's not focus on that. Who wants to hear about our trip to the coast last summer?" Her attempt to redirect the conversation was almost frantic, and I could tell she was just as unsettled as I was. As dinner progressed, the chatter became increasingly strained. I felt like an intruder in a delicate dance, where everyone was acutely aware of their steps, but me. I caught snippets of conversation that seemed to hold double meanings, veiled references that made my skin crawl. "Sometimes, you just have to know your place," one of Sarah's uncles remarked, his voice dripping with condescension. I could feel the weight of his words settle over me, and I shot a glance at Sarah, who appeared to be lost in thought, her brow furrowed. "Exactly," her father added, a slight edge to his tone. "Respecting traditions is important. Some things are better left unchallenged." "What kind of traditions?" I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. Just family traditions, her mother replied too quickly, her smile faltering for just a moment. Nothing you need to worry about, dear. The conversation shifted again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stepped into a world that was not meant for me. I felt a chill run down my spine as I glanced around the table, noting the way everyone was watching me, their smiles strained, their eyes unreadable. After dinner, we retreated to the living room, where Sarah's family began to share stories from their past, each tale seemingly innocuous but laced with an undercurrent of something dark. I listened intently, trying to piece together the family dynamics, but each story seemed to raise more questions than it answered. James, you should share one of your stories. One of her aunts suggested with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm sure you have plenty of interesting experiences. Sure, I stammered, feeling the spotlight shift to me. I thought back to my recent trip to New Orleans for a photography project, where I had captured the vibrant culture and haunting history of the city. I went to New Orleans recently. The architecture is stunning, and there's this whole vibe that just draws you in. As I spoke, I noticed the way Sarah's family exchanged glances again, their expressions unreadable. I couldn't shake the feeling that my words were being dissected, weighed against some invisible standard that I couldn't comprehend. New Orleans, huh? A city with a lot of history, one of her uncles said slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he were trying to gauge my reaction. Yeah, it's rich with culture and stories, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. I love capturing the essence of a place through my lens. Essence, another voice chimed in, laced with a hint of mockery. Sometimes, it's better to look at things from a distance. You never know what you might uncover. I felt the chill creeping back into the room, and I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. There was something unsettling about their words, a hidden threat that hung in the air. Why don't we take a break? Sarah suggested suddenly, her voice slightly shaky. Maybe go for a walk outside? Good idea. The fresh air will do us all some good, her mother agreed too eagerly, and I couldn't help but feel relieved to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the living room. As we stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that had settled in my bones. Sarah walked beside me, her expression thoughtful. Are you okay? She asked softly, glancing up at me. I know my family can be a lot. Yeah, I'm fine. Just trying to get a read on everyone, I replied, forcing a smile. It's a bit intense in there, don't you think? Intense is one way to put it, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But they mean well. It's just how they are. Right, I replied, though I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker lurking beneath the surface. As we walked under the stars, I felt a growing unease gnawing at me, a sense that I was on the precipice of something I couldn't quite understand. And as Sarah took my hand, I couldn't help but wonder what secrets her family was hiding, and what role I was destined to play in their twisted narrative. As I woke up the next morning, the sun filtered through the heavy curtains of the mansion, casting long shadows across the ornate carpet. The air felt thick with history, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the house had seen more than just family gatherings. I stretched and glanced over at Sarah, who was still asleep beside me. Her serene expression brought a brief smile to my face, but it faded quickly as I recalled the strange tension from the night before. I quietly slipped out of bed and decided to explore the mansion a bit more. The hallways were vast, adorned with dark wood paneling and old portraits that seemed to watch my every move. I felt like an intruder in a world that didn't quite welcome me. I made my way down a long corridor, finally arriving at a large wooden door marked library. As I entered, I was immediately struck by the musty scent of old books. The library was a treasure trove of knowledge, with shelves lined from floor to ceiling. I walked deeper into the room, running my fingers along the spines of books, each one whispering stories of the past. But there was something that caught my eye. Out of the corner of the room, a book stood out, its cover worn and faded. It read, The Path of Purification. Curiosity piqued. I reached for it, sensing an unsettling energy emanating from its pages. Just as I was about to open it, I heard a soft voice behind me. You shouldn't be in here. I turned to see Sarah entering the library, her expression shifting from surprise to discomfort. "Oh, I didn't think you'd be awake so early," she said, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep," I replied, holding the book up. "What's this about?" Her eyes widened slightly, and she stepped closer, glancing at the cover. "It's just an old book, nothing important." She reached out and gently took it from my hands, placing it back on the shelf. "Let's go for a walk instead. I think you'd enjoy the gardens." "Sure, but..." I hesitated. "What's the deal with your family? I mean, they seem a bit off." Sarah's smile faltered. "They're just protective. You know how families can be." She stepped towards the door, her body language telling me she wanted to change the subject. "Okay," I said, following her out, "but I can't shake this feeling that there's something more going on here." As we stepped outside, the sun bathed the manicured gardens in golden light, but the beauty did little to ease my unease. "You're right about one thing," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "This place is stunning." "Yeah, it's a little slice of heaven," Sarah replied, her tone almost wistful. "But it's also different. Sometimes I think it's a bit too much." We walked in silence for a moment, taking in the blooming flowers and the perfectly trimmed hedges. I found myself wanting to dig deeper, to uncover the layers that lay beneath Sarah's casual demeanor. "What do you mean by different?" "Your family seems intense." She hesitated, her gaze drifting to the ground. "It's just, there are things about them that I don't understand either. Some family traditions are better left unspoken." "Traditions?" I pressed, wanting her to elaborate. "Like what?" "James, let's not talk about this right now," she said, a hint of frustration in her voice. "Can we just enjoy the day?" "All right, I get it, but I can't shake the feeling that there's something you're not telling me." We continued walking, but the air felt heavy with unspoken words. I couldn't help but feel like I was walking on eggshells, trying to navigate through the complexities of her family. After a while, we returned to the mansion for lunch. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I noticed subtle glances exchanged among Sarah's family members. It was as if they were communicating in a language I couldn't understand. I tried to engage in conversation, but every attempt seemed to be met with evasiveness. "So James," Sarah's father said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "What do you do for a living?" "I'm a photographer," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I focus on capturing moments that tell stories." "Interesting," he said, but I could sense the underlying skepticism. "And what kind of stories do you think you're capturing?" I felt the heat of the room rise as I answered. "The ones that reveal truth and beauty in our world. I think every moment holds significance." Sarah's brother chimed in, a smirk on his face. "Well, I hope you're not expecting to capture any truths around here. We prefer our own version of reality." The table fell silent, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. "Oh, you know," he said, shrugging nonchalantly. "Some things are better left in the dark, like family secrets." A sudden noise broke the tension. A loud bang echoed through the dining room, causing everyone to freeze. I looked around, confusion etched on my face. "What was that?" Sarah's mother forced a laugh. "Just the wind, dear. Nothing to worry about." But the way she avoided eye contact only deepened my suspicion. As the meal progressed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The atmosphere felt suffocating, and I noticed the way Sarah's family exchanged furtive glances, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. After lunch, I excused myself, needing to escape the stifling environment. I wandered back to the library, hoping to find some solace among the books. But as I entered, I was struck by an overwhelming sense of dread. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, and the air felt charged with an energy I couldn't quite place. Suddenly, I heard whispers coming from the basement, faint but urgent. My heart raced as I approached the door leading to the stairs. I hesitated, glancing back over my shoulder. What if it was just my imagination? But the whispers grew louder, pulling me in like a moth to a flame. I tried the doorknob, but it was locked tight. Just then, one of Sarah's relatives appeared at the end of the hallway. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone sharp. Just looking for something," I stammered, trying to sound casual. "You shouldn't go down there," he said, stepping closer, his expression tight. "It's not safe." "Safe? What do you mean?" I pressed, my curiosity piqued. "Just trust me," "Some things are better left alone," he replied, eyes narrowing. "You don't understand." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, confusion and intrigue battling inside me. What secrets lay hidden in that basement? I felt a burning need to uncover the truth, but the warning echoed in my mind, urging caution. I returned to the main floor, feeling more unsettled than ever. The whispers had ignited something within me, a desire to dig deeper, to unravel the mystery of Sarah's family. But with each passing moment, I realized that the answers I sought might come at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. The old mansion loomed behind me, its towering silhouette casting long shadows across the manicured lawn as the sun dipped below the horizon. I felt a strange mixture of excitement and trepidation as I walked back inside, the heavy wooden door creaking ominously as I pushed it open. The warmth of the house enveloped me, but underneath it all, I felt an unsettling chill. The family had been polite enough during dinner, but there was something off. An undercurrent of tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I brushed it off, attributing it to typical family dynamics, but a gnawing feeling in my gut urged me to stay alert. After a restless night, I woke up early, the sunlight filtering through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the wooden floor. I needed to shake off the sense of unease that lingered from the previous evening. I decided to explore the mansion, eager to distract myself and perhaps uncover more about Sarah's family. As I wandered through the grand corridors, I stumbled upon a massive wooden door slightly ajar. My curiosity piqued. I pushed it open to reveal a library that seemed to stretch endlessly. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines dusty and worn, some even unreadable. I couldn't help but feel like I had stepped into a different era. I walked further inside, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet, and soon found myself drawn to a particular shelf that housed books on the occult and philosophy. My heart raced as I pulled one of the books from the shelf. Its cover was worn, the title, The Path of Purification, embossed in gold. I flipped through the pages, my fingers brushing the yellowed paper. The content was dense, filled with strange symbols and phrases that felt foreign yet oddly familiar. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. "James?" It was Sarah, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "What are you doing in here?" I turned to face her, holding the book up as if it were a trophy. "Just exploring. This place is fascinating. What's this book about?" Her eyes darted to the cover, and I noticed her expression shift from curiosity to discomfort in an instant. "Oh, that one. It's just an old family heirloom. Nothing to worry about." She stepped closer and tried to take the book from my hands, her fingers brushing against mine. "Let's go for a walk, all right? I could use some fresh air." I hesitated, the book feeling heavier in my hands. "Are you sure? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of history here. Don't you want to talk about it?" "Not really," she said, her tone a bit sharper than I expected. "There are things about my family that are better left unknown, trust me." Feeling a bit dismissed, I shrugged and followed her outside. As we walked through the expansive grounds, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her family's history, but she skillfully dodged my questions. "Sarah, come on. I can tell there's something you're not telling me. Why the secrecy?" She stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "James, please, just drop it. You don't know what you're getting into." I opened my mouth to protest, but thought better of it. I could feel the distance growing between us, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. I tried to shake off my frustration, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was seriously wrong. Later that evening, after dinner, I decided to investigate. The family had retreated to their rooms, leaving the house in an eerie stillness. I crept down the darkened hallway, the wooden floor creaking softly under my weight. As I approached the basement door, I heard something, a faint whispering coming from behind it. My heart raced as I pressed my ear against the cold wood. Sacrifice must be done, the time is near. I pulled back, my breath hitching in my throat. What was happening down there? I glanced around, ensuring no one was watching before I reached for the doorknob. It was locked, but something inside me urged me to keep trying. I fumbled with the knob, but it wouldn't budge. Just as I was about to give up, I heard footsteps approaching. I quickly stepped back and leaned against the wall, heart pounding. "James?" It was one of Sarah's uncles, his voice low and gravelly. "What are you doing here?" I feigned an innocent expression. "Oh, just looking for a bathroom. I thought it was down here." He narrowed his eyes, studying me. "You don't want to go down there. Trust me, it's not a place for you." I forced a chuckle, trying to mask my unease. "Right, of course. Just a little lost, I guess." "Stay out of family matters," he warned, his tone dropping to a menacing whisper. "You wouldn't understand what's at stake." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me breathless. What was he hiding? I waited for a moment before slipping away. I needed to know what was happening. Late that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I grabbed my camera. The darkness of the house felt suffocating, but I was determined to uncover the truth. I made my way back to the basement, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This time, I brought a flashlight. I shone it on the door, my fingers trembling as I fumbled for the knob again. To my surprise, it clicked open. The stairs leading down were steep and narrow, and I felt a chill creeping up my spine as I descended into the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of dampness filled my nostrils. I flicked on the flashlight, illuminating the space before me. What I saw made my heart race. The walls were covered in strange symbols, etched deep into the wood, their meanings lost to me. Candles stood in crooked holders, some burned down to stubs, while others flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. In the center of the room lay an elaborate altar, adorned with odd trinkets and what looked like remnants of old rituals. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself, stepping further inside. I felt like I had stumbled into a terrible secret. My fingers itched to reach for my camera, to document every detail, but something held me back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding on something sacred, something dark. As I explored, I noticed a small table with several photographs laid out. I leaned closer, my heart thudding in my chest. The images depicted family members in various states of what looked like ecstatic fervor, their eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams or chants. A shiver ran through me as I realized they were performing some sort of ritualistic dance, their bodies entwined in a way that felt disturbingly intimate. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the basement, breaking my reverie. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Another voice joined the whispers from earlier, more distinct now, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The air grew heavy with anticipation, a sense of dread washing over me. "James, you shouldn't be here," a voice said, low and menacing, pulling me from my thoughts. I whirled around to find Sarah's uncle standing at the top of the stairs, his silhouette framed by the dim light. I took a step back, my heart racing. I was just exploring. He took a step forward, a sinister smile creeping across his face. "Exploring things you don't understand can be dangerous, you know." I felt trapped, cornered. "What is this place? What are you all doing down here?" He stepped closer, the shadows twisting around him. "You'll find out soon enough, but you might not like what you discover." In that moment, I knew I had to escape. I turned to run back up the stairs, but the darkness felt suffocating. The whispers growing louder, more insistent. The weight of the secrets pressing down on me like a heavy fog. As I reached the door, I glanced back, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the family knew I was onto them, and they wouldn't let me leave without a fight. As I made my way back upstairs, my heart raced from the thrill of uncovering the secrets hidden in the basement. The air felt thick with tension, and I could barely shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach. The symbols on the walls, the strange artifacts scattered around, it all hinted at something sinister lurking beneath the surface of Sarah's family. I was lost in my thoughts when I suddenly heard footsteps approaching. Before I could react, the door swung open, and there stood Uncle Gerald, Sarah's imposing figure of a relative, blocking my escape. His eyes bore into me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "What were you doing down there?" he demanded, his voice low and gravelly. I was just curious," I stammered, trying to keep my composure. "I heard some noises and wanted to check it out." "Curious? In this house?" He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "You do well to remember that some doors are best left closed. You don't know what you're meddling with." I swallowed hard, feeling a chill run down my spine. I just wanted to understand. I'm here for the weekend, and I thought getting to know your family better would help. Understand? He chuckled, a harsh sound that echoed through the hallway. You think you can understand us? You're an outsider, James, and outsiders don't get to ask questions. You need to respect our traditions. Traditions? I echoed, my voice rising slightly in disbelief. Is that what you call it? Because it looked more like something out of a horror movie down there. His expression darkened, and I could see the warning in his eyes. This is not a game. You think you can just waltz in here and start poking around? You don't know who you're dealing with. I took a step back, trying to gauge his intentions. I'm not trying to intrude. I just want to protect Sarah. What are you hiding from me? He leaned in closer, a sly smile creeping across his face. Protect her? You think you can protect her from us? You have no idea what's at stake here. We've been doing this for generations. You don't just walk away from family. I felt a surge of frustration. This isn't about family. This is about something darker. I saw what's in the basement, and I can't just pretend it doesn't exist. Uncle Gerald's demeanor shifted. His smile faded, replaced by a cold glare. You need to leave this family alone, boy. If you know what's good for you, you'll keep your distance. This is your only warning. Before I could respond, he stepped back and turned on his heel, striding away down the dimly lit hallway. I stood there, my heart pounding against my chest, grappling with the weight of his words. As I made my way to Sarah's room, uncertainty gnawed at me. I needed to talk to her and share what I had discovered, but I also feared how she would react. When I reached her door, I hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I knocked softly and the door creaked open. Sarah stood there, rubbing her eyes, her hair tousled from sleep. James, what's wrong? Can we talk? I asked, stepping inside her room. The space was decorated with photos of family gatherings and framed memories that felt eerily normal compared to what I had just witnessed. Of course, she replied, concern etched on her face. You look like you've seen a ghost. More like I've uncovered one, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, I found something in the basement. Something that made me really uncomfortable. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? What did you find? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. There were symbols on the walls and artifacts that looked like they were used for rituals. I watched as her expression shifted from concern to something else, fear perhaps. James, you shouldn't have gone down there, she said, her tone urgent. There are things in this family that you're better off not knowing. But I need to know, I insisted, frustration boiling over. I care about you, and I can't just ignore what I saw. It feels wrong. I get that you're trying to protect me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But you don't understand. My family has their ways, their beliefs. They've been this way for generations. Beliefs? I scoffed, anger and confusion swirling inside me. Is that what you call it? It looked like a cult down there. This isn't just a family tradition. This is dangerous. Please, James, she pleaded, her eyes pleading. Just drop it. You're not from here, and you don't know what you're getting into. It's not safe for you to dig deeper. I felt a mix of betrayal and desperation. So you're just going to ignore it? Pretend everything is fine? I need to know you're safe, Sarah. I can't just stand by. She looked away, her expression conflicted. You don't understand what's at stake. I can't have you involved in this. I can't. My heart sank. So you're choosing them over me? After everything we've been through? It's not like that. She cried, tears glistening in her eyes. I love you, but you have to trust me. Please, just let it go, for your own sake. I took a step back, feeling the weight of her words. I don't know if I can do that. In that moment, I realized the distances between us had grown wider than I ever thought possible. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but the fear that had taken root in my heart pushed me away. I need some air, I finally said, turning away from her. I walked out of the room, feeling the coldness of the house wrap around me like a shroud. The oppressive atmosphere pressed against my chest, and I knew I had to find a way to uncover the truth, even if it meant risking everything. As I wandered through the dimly lit corridors, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. The portraits on the walls seemed to follow me, their eyes filled with judgment and secrets. I needed to gather evidence, something concrete, to show Sarah something that would break through the fog of denial she was shrouded in. It was then that I resolved to return to the basement. Whatever rituals they were practicing, whatever darkness lingered within those walls, I would expose it. The stakes were too high, and I refused to let my love for Sarah blind me to the truth. I had to be brave, for both of us. As the morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of the mansion, I sat at the long, ornate dining table, trying to enjoy the breakfast spread in front of me. The smell of freshly baked pastries mingled with the aroma of coffee, but the warmth of the meal did little to ease the chill settling in my stomach. The family was gathered around, their chatter a mix of laughter and uneasy glances. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Just as I was about to take a bite of my croissant, a comment from one of Sarah's relatives cut through the air like a knife. "You know, James, you might want to think about changing your color if you want to fit in better around here," he said with a smirk, his eyes glinting with a malice I hadn't noticed before. I froze, my fork hovering midair. "What do you mean by that?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. He let out a mocking chuckle. "Oh, come on. We all know that some people just can't escape their past. It's like a shadow that follows you around, always reminding you of your mistakes." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if he had just delivered a profound truth. The laughter from the others felt forced, and I could see Sarah's face pale slightly. I set my fork down, my appetite vanishing. "I don't think it's right to judge someone based on their skin color or history. Everyone deserves a chance to be seen for who they are, not what they look like," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, though my heart raced with anger and confusion. The relative's smile faded, replaced by a cold stare. "You're naive if you think that's how the world works. Some things are beyond your control, James. Just remember that." The tension hung in the air like a thick fog, and I could feel the scrutiny of the family members on me. I glanced at Sarah, hoping for some support, but she merely fiddled with her napkin, avoiding my gaze. After breakfast, I excused myself, desperate to shake off the unease that lingered in the dining room. I needed answers. I made my way to the study, hoping to find some distraction in the vast library. As I stepped inside, the atmosphere was thick with dust and the smell of old leather. Books lined the shelves, some so high I had to stretch to reach them. A particular book caught my attention, The Path of Purification. The title sent a shiver down my spine, and I pulled it off the shelf, opening it to reveal pages filled with strange symbols and writings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. My mind raced with questions. What kind of family was Sarah a part of? Just then, Sarah entered the room, her presence startling me. "What are you doing in here?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and something that resembled worry. "I found this book," I said, holding it up for her to see. "What is this all about?" She stiffened, her face draining of color. "Oh, that book? It's an old family thing. We don't really talk about it." She stepped closer, her gaze darting around the room as if checking for unseen eyes. "Why not?" I pressed, unable to contain my curiosity. "What does it have to do with your family?" "James, please. It's not something you need to concern yourself with. Let's just go outside and enjoy the day." She turned, clearly uncomfortable, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of betrayal. Why was she avoiding the topic? As we stepped back into the sunlight, I tried to keep the conversation light, but my mind was racing. "Sarah, I just want to know more about your family. Why is it so difficult for you to talk about them?" She sighed, her expression turning distant. "There are things about my family that it's better if you don't know. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I urged, determined to peel back the layers of secrecy. "I deserve to know what I'm getting into, especially if I'm going to be part of your life." She looked away, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for an escape. "Some things are just better left in the past. Trust me on this." Frustrated, I decided to change the subject. "What do you think about going into town later? Maybe we can grab some food or explore a bit?" I tried to inject some lightness into the conversation, but Sarah merely nodded, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something, and that the shadows lurking around this mansion were more than just figments of my imagination. I felt the weight of her family's history, pressing down on us. And with each step, I grew more determined to uncover the truth. When we returned to the mansion, I noticed a few family members gathered in the living room, their hushed voices barely concealing the urgency of their conversation. I caught snippets of phrases that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. Talk of purification and the chosen one. I glanced at Sarah, who seemed to shrink under the weight of her family's expectations, her eyes darting away from the gathering. What are they talking about? I whispered, unable to hold back my curiosity. She shook her head, her expression tight. It's nothing, just family matters. But I wasn't convinced. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and I needed to know what it was. As the day wore on, I felt an insatiable need to dig deeper. I retreated to my room and tried to research more about Sarah's family online, but the results were sparse and frustrating. I stumbled upon a forum discussing a radical group with connections to the area, and my heart raced as I read through the posts. The group had a history of strange rituals and a firm belief in bloodlines and purity. The more I read, the more I began to connect the dots. Was Sarah's family involved in something sinister? Later, as I tried to confront Sarah once more, I spotted her staring at a family portrait hanging in the hallway. It was an old photograph, stiff and formal, showing her ancestors clad in dark, heavy clothing, their expressions unreadable. I approached her, my heart pounding. What's with that picture? Why does it fascinate you so much? She turned to me, her face a mask of conflict. It's complicated, James. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I insisted, stepping closer. You can't keep shutting me out like this. I care about you, and I need to know what's happening with your family. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment I thought she might open up. But then she shook her head, a look of determination crossing her features. I can't. There are things that are best left unsaid. You don't know what you're asking for. The walls felt like they were closing in around me, and I felt a surge of frustration. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she told me everything. Instead, I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. I just want to help you, Sarah, but I can't do that if you keep shutting me out. I know, she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but it's not just about us. There are things at play here that are much bigger than you or me. As I walked away, the weight of her words hung heavily in the air. She was part of something dark and dangerous, something I was only beginning to grasp, and if I didn't figure it out soon, I feared it would swallow us both whole. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a shroud, smothering every thought and making even the faintest sound feel magnified. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing unsettlingly in the dim light filtering through the curtains. The events of the past day had left me on edge. The odd stares from Sarah's family, the furtive whispers, the door that had slammed shut on its own. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong in this place. As I lay there, the clock on the nightstand ticked away the seconds, its sound echoing in the stillness. I turned to glance at Sarah, who was sleeping peacefully beside me, blissfully unaware of the dark undercurrents swirling around us. I felt a pang of frustration mixed with fear. I wanted to share my concerns with her, to wake her up and talk about everything I had discovered, but I also knew that she was already distancing herself. Each time I broached the subject of her family, she would close up, as if sealing away a part of herself that I was not allowed to access. Suddenly, I heard it, a low murmuring sound, almost like chanting, drifting up from the depths of the house. My heart raced. I sat up, straining to hear more clearly. It was coming from the basement. I had to know what was happening. I had to see for myself. I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah. I grabbed my camera from the side table, the familiar weight of it providing a small measure of comfort. It felt like my only weapon in a place that was becoming increasingly hostile. I tiptoed through the darkened hallway, the wooden floorboards creaking softly under my feet as I made my way to the door that led down to the basement. Once at the door, I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. A chill ran down my spine as I recalled the warning from Sarah's uncle about meddling in family affairs. But the curiosity and dread coiling in my stomach pushed me forward. I turned the knob slowly, the door creaking open to reveal a staircase leading down into darkness. With each step I took down the stairs, the murmuring grew louder, more distinct. It was rhythmic, haunting, almost like a chant, echoing off the walls. I reached the bottom and peered into the dimly lit room. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Shadows flitted across the walls, and as my eyes adjusted to the low light, I caught sight of something that sent a jolt of panic through me. In the center of the room, there was a circle of figures, their backs turned to me. They were dressed in dark robes, and their heads were bowed as they chanted in unison, their voices rising and falling like a sinister melody. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. This was no ordinary gathering. I felt like I had stumbled into something ancient, something terrifying. I pulled my camera up, instinctively hitting the record button. The soft whir of the lens focusing felt loud in the oppressive silence. I needed evidence. I needed to show Sarah what was happening right under our noses. My heart pounded in my chest as I captured the scene before me, the flickering candlelight illuminating their faces, revealing expressions that were almost euphoric. Suddenly, a figure stepped into view, a hooded figure standing at the edge of the circle. My breath caught in my throat as I focused the camera on it. The figure raised its arms, and the chanting intensified. The words began to blur together, almost indecipherable, but the energy in the room shifted, becoming more volatile. I could see the other family members leaning in closer, their eyes wide with a fervor that sent chills down my spine. "James, you shouldn't be here." A voice suddenly boomed from behind me, breaking the trance. It was Sarah's uncle, his face twisted into a mixture of anger and fear. I spun around, my heart racing, but it was too late. He lunged at me, and instinctively I pressed the shutter button, capturing a frantic shot of his expression. In that moment, panic surged through me. I turned and bolted back towards the staircase, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the confined space. I could hear the chanting continuing behind me, but it was drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears. I had to escape. I had to warn Sarah. As I reached the stairs, I glanced back one last time. The sight that greeted me made my blood run cold. The figure in the hood had turned its face toward me, and in the flickering light, I could see its features, horrifyingly familiar. It was a face I had seen before, a face I had never expected to see again. My mind reeled. How could this be? I stumbled up the stairs, my pulse pounding in my ears as I burst through the door and slammed it shut behind me. I leaned against it, gasping for breath, my heart racing as I tried to process what I had just witnessed. The basement was a nest of secrets, a dark underbelly of the family that I had been blind to until now. I needed to find Sarah. I needed to make her understand the danger we were in. But first, I had to collect myself. I steadied my breathing, reminding myself that I had to be calm. I glanced down at my camera, still recording, capturing my panic and disbelief. I would show her the truth, but would she believe me? I quickly made my way back to our room, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just seen. The chanting echoed in my head, a reminder of the darkness lurking just beneath the surface of Sarah's family. I had to convince her to leave with me, to get out of this house before it was too late. I just hoped she would listen. I bolted upright in bed, the echoes of the ritual still reverberating in my mind like a haunting melody. My heart raced as I turned to look at Sarah, who lay beside me, her face illuminated by the pale moonlight streaming through the window. I shook her gently, desperation clawing at my throat. "Sarah, wake up!" I urged, my voice a frantic whisper. She stirred, blinking against the dim light. "James, what's wrong?" she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "I need to tell you what I just saw," I said, urgency flooding my words as I fought to compose myself. "You won't believe me, but you have to listen. They're performing some kind of ritual down in the basement. Your family, they're not who they seem." Her brow furrowed, confusion etched across her features. "What are you talking about? Ritual? James, you're scaring me." "No, listen. I snuck down there and I saw them. Your family was in a circle, chanting and—" I hesitated, trying to find the right words. "They were preparing for a sacrifice. I'm serious. I took pictures I can show you." I reached for my camera on the bedside table, my hands trembling as I fumbled with it. My heart sank as I glanced back at Sarah, who now sat up straight, her expression shifting from confusion to fear. "James, you shouldn't have gone down there. You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of concern and something else. Was it fear? "I thought I could find out what was going on," I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. "But they're dangerous, Sarah. You have to believe me." "Show me the pictures," she said finally, her voice low and hesitant. I quickly scrolled through my camera's memory, my fingers shaking as I searched for the images I had captured. My breath hitched when I finally found one. The dark basement, the family huddled together, the encroaching figure cloaked in shadows. I thrust the camera towards her. "Look," I exclaimed, my pulse racing. She took the camera, her eyes scanning the image, but instead of shock or horror, I saw something else in her expression. Hesitation. A flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "James, I can't look at this right now. You shouldn't have invaded their privacy like that." "What?" My voice rose incredulously. "This isn't about privacy. This is about your family potentially killing someone, and you're worried about privacy?" "James, please, calm down," she pleaded, her voice rising. She was visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she handed the camera back to me. "You don't get it. They're my family. I can't just believe you without any proof." "Proof? You think I wanted to see this? I'm trying to protect you," I shouted, frustration and fear intertwining within me. "They're hiding something from you, and I don't think it's just a family secret. I think it's something much worse." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of anger flash across her face. "You're being dramatic, James. You're letting your imagination run wild. You don't know them like I do." "I know enough," I snapped back. "I don't know if you've noticed, but they've been treating me differently since I got here. They don't like me, Sarah. I can feel it. Something is wrong, and you need to open your eyes." A heavy silence fell between us, the tension palpable. I could see the conflict raging in her eyes, and my heart sank as I realized how alone I felt in this moment, how distant she was becoming. "James, she began, her voice faltering. "Just think about it," I interrupted, my voice softer now, pleading. "What do you know about your family's past? Why are they so secretive? We can't ignore this. I don't want to lose you to whatever they're involved in." She looked down, a shadow crossing her face as she wrestled with her thoughts. "I don't know everything. Okay? It's complicated. My family, they have their traditions, but it doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong." "Traditions? Sarah, what kind of traditions involve chanting and sacrifices?" I pressed, my voice rising again, the urgency returning. "You have to see how twisted this is." "Stop," she shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "You don't understand. You're an outsider, and you're looking at this from a completely different perspective. My family has their ways, and it's not for you to judge." "Not for me to judge?" I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, anger boiling over. "Maybe if you just admit that something is off, we could figure this out together." "Admit what?" She shot back, her voice laced with frustration. "That my family is hiding something? That they're dangerous? You think I want to believe that?" I inhaled deeply, trying to quell the storm inside me. "I just want you to be safe, Sarah. I care about you, and I can't just stand by while they pull you deeper into whatever this is." She looked at me, her expression torn. "You don't know what you're asking me to do. You want me to turn my back on my family without proof? You want me to choose you over them? I want you to choose your life over their twisted games," I exclaimed, my voice dropping to a whisper. Desperation clawing at my throat. "Please, Sarah, just think about it." Silence enveloped us again, the weight of our words hanging heavy in the air. I could feel the distance growing between us, as if an invisible chasm had opened up, threatening to swallow us both whole. "James," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need time to think." "Time?" I echoed, my heart sinking. "Time is the one thing we don't have. I'm telling you, if we don't do something now, it might be too late." "I just need you to trust me," she replied, her voice trembling. "Trust me, that I know my family, even if it's hard for you to believe." I shook my head, frustration boiling within me. "Trust? After what I've seen, how can you expect me to trust them or you when you're so willing to ignore the truth?" Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I felt a wave of emotion crash over me. "James, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Don't make this harder than it already is. Then help me understand, I urged, my heart aching. I can't, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Not right now. With those words, she turned away from me, leaving me in a whirlwind of fear and confusion. I felt utterly alone, the weight of the night pressing down on me as I realized just how far apart we had drifted. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding in my chest. In that moment, I understood. The shadows of the family loomed larger than I had ever imagined, and I was caught in the middle of a storm that threatened to consume us both. I woke up the next morning feeling the weight of the previous night pressing down on me like a thick fog. My heart was still racing from the images I had seen, the ritual, the chanting, the cloaked figure. As I lay in bed, I tried to convince myself that it had all been a nightmare, but the remnants of fear clung to my mind like a shadow. I glanced at the clock, 8 a.m. I had to get out of this place. I threw on some clothes and headed down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence of the mansion. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen tension. I approached the front door, my heart pounding with hope and despair. I twisted the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled harder, but it was locked tight. Panic surged within me. I rushed to the windows, but they too were barred and sealed. I felt like a trapped animal, my instincts screaming at me to escape. Sarah! I called out, my voice echoing through the vast emptiness of the house. I needed her. I needed someone who understood what was happening. I made my way to the living room, where I spotted her sitting on the couch, surrounded by her family. They were engaged in hushed conversation, their voices low and conspiratorial. As I stepped closer, I realized something was off. Sarah seemed distant, her eyes glazed over as if she were in a trance. Sarah, I said again, urgency lacing my voice. We need to talk. Something's not right here. She turned her head slowly, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. But then it faded, replaced by an expression that sent chills down my spine. James, she said, her voice unnaturally calm. What are you doing here? What do you mean? I'm trying to... I hesitated, glancing at her family. They were watching me with expressions that ranged from disdain to something darker, something predatory. We need to get out of this house. They're hiding something. I saw them last night. Last night? She asked, tilting her head slightly, as if trying to process my words. What do you mean? What did you see? Sarah, please, I pleaded, stepping closer. They're planning something. I heard them chanting. I saw a figure in a hood. It's all part of some sick ritual. We have to leave. Suddenly, one of her relatives, a tall man with a piercing gaze, stood up. Sarah, why don't you come and help us with something in the kitchen? He suggested, his tone polite yet commanding. Maybe later, she replied, her voice soft, as if she were still trying to wake up from a dream. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between her loyalty to her family and her feelings for me. No, now, he insisted, his voice hardening. You need to help, don't keep us waiting. She glanced back at me, and in that fleeting moment, I saw fear mixed with confusion. James, go with him, I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. I'll be right here. Just go. She hesitated for a moment longer before rising from the couch. As she followed her family into the kitchen, I felt a surge of frustration. I needed to know what was happening. My instincts screamed at me to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, even if it meant putting myself in danger. I moved to the hallway, listening intently. Their voices were muffled, but I could hear the occasional laughter, an unsettling sound given the circumstances. I felt like a voyeur, intruding on a world I didn't belong to, a world steeped in secrets and malice. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. A door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway, leading to the basement. The memory of the whispers I had heard the night before flooded my mind. I hesitated for a moment, but my curiosity overwhelmed my fear. I had to know what lay behind that door. I approached it slowly, heart pounding in my chest. As I reached for the doorknob, I heard voices from the kitchen again, and I quickly pulled my hand back, stepping into the shadows. I could still hear Sarah's laughter, but it felt hollow, as if she were a puppet, her strings pulled by unseen hands. Just as I was about to retreat, the door creaked open slightly. My pulse quickened, and I took a deep breath, pushing it open just enough to slip inside. The basement was dark, the air musty and stale. I flicked on my phone's flashlight, illuminating the cramped space filled with old furniture and boxes covered in dust. As I ventured further in, I spotted a wall covered in strange symbols, etchings that looked almost like a language I didn't understand. My stomach twisted with unease as I traced the shapes with my fingers. What kind of family was Sarah part of? I felt like I was trespassing in a sacred, forbidden space. Suddenly, the faint sound of chanting drifted down from above, sending a shiver down my spine. I crouched low, my breath hitching in my throat. The voices were growing louder, more intense. I could feel the energy shifting, a palpable tension in the air that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I knew I had to get back upstairs to warn Sarah, but as I turned to leave, I heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged within me. I quickly ducked behind a stack of boxes, holding my breath as the door creaked open. "James?" a voice called out, one of Sarah's relatives. "What are you doing down here?" I felt my heart stop. My mind raced, desperately searching for an excuse, a reason to explain my presence. "I was looking for something," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I thought I heard a noise." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. "You shouldn't be down here. It's not safe." There was an edge to his tone, an unspoken threat that made my skin crawl. "I'll leave," I said quickly, trying to back away, but he blocked my path. "I was just curious. I didn't mean any harm." "Curiosity can lead to dangerous places," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You have no idea what you're messing with." I felt a surge of adrenaline. "I'm just trying to protect Sarah. She doesn't belong to this madness." His eyes darkened, and he took a step closer, invading my personal space. "You think you can save her? You don't understand what's at stake. This family has a legacy, a purpose. You're just an outsider." I backed away slowly, my mind racing. I needed to find Sarah, to get her out of here before it was too late. "I don't care about your legacy. I just want her to be safe." Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. "James!" It was Sarah's voice, frantic and desperate. "What's going on?" I pulled harder, but it was locked tight. Panic surged within me. I rushed to the windows, but they too were barred and sealed. I felt like a trapped animal, my instincts screaming at me to escape. "Sarah!" I called out, my voice echoing through the vast emptiness of the house. I needed her. I needed someone who understood what was happening. I made my way to the living room, where I spotted her sitting on the couch, surrounded by her family. They were engaged in hushed conversation, their voices low and conspiratorial. As I stepped closer, I realized something was off. Sarah seemed distant, her eyes glazed over as if she were in a trance. "Sarah," I said again, urgency lacing my voice. "We need to talk. Something's not right here." She turned her head slowly, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. But then it faded, replaced by an expression that sent chills down my spine. "James," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "What are you doing here?" "What do you mean?" "I'm trying to—" I hesitated, glancing at her family. They were watching me with expressions that ranged from disdain to something darker, something predatory. "We need to get out of this house. They're hiding something. I saw them last night." "Last night?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, as if trying to process my words. "What do you mean? What did you see?" "Sarah, please," I pleaded, stepping closer. "They're planning something. I heard them chanting. I saw a figure in a hood. It's all part of some sick ritual. We have to leave." Suddenly, one of her relatives, a tall man with a piercing gaze, stood up. "Sarah, why don't you come and help us with something in the kitchen?" he suggested, his tone polite yet commanding. "Maybe later," she replied, her voice soft, as if she were still trying to wake up from a dream. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between her loyalty to her family and her feelings for me. "No, now," he insisted, his voice hardening. "You need to help, don't keep us waiting." She glanced back at me, and in that fleeting moment, I saw fear mixed with confusion. "James, go with him," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. "I'll be right here. Just go." She hesitated for a moment longer before rising from the couch. As she followed her family into the kitchen, I felt a surge of frustration. I needed to know what was happening. My instincts screamed at me to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, even if it meant putting myself in danger. I moved to the hallway, listening intently. Their voices were muffled, but I could hear the occasional laughter. an unsettling sound given the circumstances. I felt like a voyeur intruding on a world I didn't belong to, a world steeped in secrets and malice. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. A door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway, leading to the basement. I could see Sarah's family, her parents, her aunts and uncles, each absorbed in this terrifying ceremony. My heart sank as I realized they were not just relatives. They were part of something far more sinister. "Bring forth the vessel," a voice commanded, and I felt the air shift as a figure stepped forward from the shadows. It was a tall, cloaked figure, its face obscured by a hood. My breath caught in my throat. Was this the entity they intended to summon? I instinctively raised my camera to record, my fingers trembling as I pressed the shutter button quietly, capturing the moment. The flash was a risk, but I felt it was necessary. I needed evidence, something that could prove to the world what was happening in this house. "Tonight, we honor the ancient pact," Uncle Charles continued, his voice rising in fervor. "We offer our blood to the entity, and in return, we shall be granted power beyond our understanding." I felt nausea churn in my stomach. Blood? What kind of blood? My thoughts raced back to the comment about sacrifice. I couldn't let this happen. I had to find a way to intervene, to stop this madness. But first I had to gather more evidence. Just then, I caught sight of Sarah standing close to the center of the circle, her expression vacant, as if she were under a trance. My heart ached at the sight. I had tried to reach her, to explain the danger, but she had recoiled, her loyalty to her family blinding her to the truth. I couldn't lose her to this darkness. "Sarah," I whispered urgently, my voice barely audible. "Snap out of it. You need to wake up." But she didn't respond. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on the cloaked figure, the light flickering across her face, casting shadows that obscured her features. "Bring forth the vessel." The voice boomed again, and I swallowed hard, knowing I had to act quickly. I could sense the ritual reaching its climax, and the atmosphere thickened with a palpable energy that felt almost alive. I steadied my hands, capturing frame after frame. "This is it," I thought. "This is the proof I need." Suddenly, the cloaked figure raised its arms and symbols began to glow on the floor. The family chanted in unison, their voices rising in a cacophony of ancient words I could not understand. The air crackled with energy, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. Now, I thought, I had to do something. I quietly edged out of my hiding place, my heart pounding louder than the chants echoing in the room. Just as I stepped into the light of the room, I felt a pair of eyes on me. One of the aunts turned, her face twisted in shock. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice sharp as a dagger. "Stop," I shouted, my voice ringing out with a mix of desperation and defiance. "You can't do this. This isn't right." The chanting halted abruptly, and all eyes turned to me. The family members looked at me as if I were a ghost, their expressions a mix of confusion and outrage. "James, you shouldn't be here." Uncle Charles growled, stepping forward, his expression darkening. "You don't understand what you're interrupting." "I understand enough," I shot back, my voice trembling but firm. "You're not going to sacrifice anyone. This is madness." "Madness?" he echoed, and his laughter was cold, devoid of any warmth. "This is destiny. You think you can change what has been written? You are but a pawn in a game you do not comprehend." I felt a rush of adrenaline. "I'm not a pawn. I'm exposing you for what you really are." I waved my camera in front of me, my heart racing as I captured the moment. "This is all going online. Everyone will see what you're doing." But before I could take another step, one of the uncles lunged at me, and I barely managed to dodge. "Get him!" he shouted, and chaos erupted. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the wooden floor as I sprinted toward the door. I could hear their footsteps behind me, the sound of their shouts echoing in my ears. I had to get out. I had to escape this nightmare. I dashed into the hallway, my mind racing with thoughts of how to reach Sarah. She had to understand what was happening. "Sarah," I yelled, hoping she would hear me, hoping she would break free from whatever hold her family had on her. But the only response was the sound of footsteps growing closer. I could feel their presence, their determination to keep their secrets hidden. I had to find a way to turn this around, to save both of us from the darkness that loomed over the mansion. "Think, James, think," I told myself as I glanced back. I could see them closing in, their faces twisted in anger and fear. I had to act fast. I had to fight back. I skidded to a halt, my heart racing as I realized I could use the chaos. If I could just expose them, if I could just show Sarah the truth, maybe we could break free together. "Let her go," I shouted, my voice ringing out against the walls of the mansion. My camera was still in hand, and I raised it once more, ready to document the truth. The family faltered for a moment, their expressions shifting from anger to confusion. In that instant, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could still save her. I huddled in the dark, cramped space of the closet, my heart pounding in my chest as I listened to the chanting from the living room. The rhythmic incantations sent chills down my spine, each word a twisted echo of despair. I could hear the intensity ramping up, the fervor in their voices rising as they prepared for whatever wicked ritual they had in mind. The air was thick with anticipation, and I knew I had to act fast. My fingers trembled as I clutched my camera, the only weapon I had against the madness unfolding just beyond the thin wooden door. I took a deep breath, attempting to steady myself, trying to remember that I was not alone in this. Sarah was here somewhere, and I desperately needed to save her from whatever grip her family had on her. Suddenly, the door swung open, and I was face to face with Uncle Charles. His eyes were wild, a mix of anger and confusion as he spotted me. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, stepping closer, his massive frame blocking my escape. "Let me go," I shouted, adrenaline coursing through me. "I know what you're planning. I won't let you do this." He laughed, a chilling sound that made my skin crawl. "You think you can stop us? You're just an outsider, a pawn in a game you don't understand." I shoved him aside, making a break for the living room. "I have proof. I'll show everyone what you're doing," I yelled, raising the camera as I burst into the room, the lens pointing directly at the circle of family members, their faces twisted in concentration. The chanting halted abruptly, and all eyes turned to me. I could feel the weight of their stares, a mix of shock and fury as I captured the scene unfolding before me. "You think this is a joke?" I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "You're not going to get away with this." The atmosphere shifted, a palpable tension crackling in the air. Sarah stood frozen at the edge of the circle, her eyes wide with confusion. "James?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the silence that had enveloped the room. "What are you doing?" "Sarah, you have to listen to me. They're planning something terrible. They think I'm some kind of..." I hesitated, the gravity of the situation weighing down on me. "They think I'm the reincarnation of someone they hate. They're going to try to sacrifice me." Her expression flickered, uncertainty clouding her features. "No, that can't be right. They wouldn't." "Look," I pointed the camera at the family, capturing their fearful expressions and the symbols drawn in the air with their hands. "You need to see this." At that moment, the family erupted into chaos. "Stop him!" Uncle Charles shouted, lunging toward me, but I was ready. I pressed the record button, capturing every moment as I kept the camera trained on them. "Everyone, look at what your family is doing," I shouted, desperation lacing my voice. "You're being manipulated. This isn't who you are." Sarah's gaze shifted between me and her family, her resolve wavering. "James, please. I don't understand." "Then let me show you," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "They're using you, Sarah. They've been feeding you lies." As I waved the camera, I noticed the figure at the center of the circle. The hooded figure was still, its presence dominating the room. "You shouldn't have come here, outsider," it spoke, its voice low and rasping, sending chills down my spine. "You have no idea what forces you're toying with." "I know enough," I shot back, anger fueling my courage. "You're nothing but a coward hiding behind a mask, and I'll expose you." The family began to murmur among themselves, confusion spreading like wildfire. Sarah's face twisted in conflict, and I could see the internal battle she was facing. "James, I need to understand," she said, her voice trembling. Before I could respond, Uncle Charles lunged at me again, this time managing to grab my wrist. "You need to leave now," he snarled, attempting to wrest the camera from my grasp. I resisted, my other hand still holding the camera firmly. "You won't silence me," I shouted, yanking my arm free, but he was relentless. "Stop him," he barked at the others, and they hesitated, caught between their loyalty to family and the horrifying truth I was trying to unveil. "Sarah!" I cried, locking eyes with her. "You have to help me. You're stronger than this." In that moment, something shifted within her. The look on her face changed from confusion to determination. "No," she shouted, stepping forward. "You're not gonna hurt him." "Sarah, you don't understand," Uncle Charles pleaded, his expression morphing into anger. "He's trying to ruin everything we've worked for." "No," she screamed, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I won't let you control me anymore." The circle began to break as her family exchanged bewildered glances, uncertainty rippling through them. I seized the opportunity, raising the camera again. "You see this? This is your family's truth." The hooded figure stepped forward, its voice dripping with malice. "You've overstepped, child. You know not the power you're challenging." "Power?" I scoffed. "You're nothing but a coward in a cloak, using fear to control your own." The family began to stir, the reality of the situation dawning on them. "What's happening?" one of the aunts whispered, her voice shaky. "Sarah, this isn't who we are," I shouted, hoping to reach them. "You can break free, you just have to choose." Much to my astonishment, Sarah took a step toward me, her eyes blazing with newfound strength. "I choose to stand with James," she declared, her voice resolute. "That's it," I said, my heart racing. "Together, we can end this." The figure recoiled, its power waning as Sarah's declaration ignited a flicker of resistance among the family members. "You," it began, but I didn't let it finish. "Your reign of terror ends now," I shouted, and with that, I pressed the record button with purpose, capturing the moment of rebellion as the truth of their actions came to light. "Stop this madness," Sarah cried, her voice echoing in the room. "We are not your puppets anymore." The family began to turn on the figure, confusion turning into anger. "You've lied to us," one of the cousins shouted, stepping away from the circle. "No, you don't understand," the figure hissed, desperation creeping into its voice. But it was too late. Sarah extended her hand toward me, a silent invitation to join her. "Let's get out of here," she said, determination etched on her face. I nodded, and together we took a step back, the camera still recording, capturing the disarray of the moment as the family began to unravel. The secrets were coming to light, and the power they had wielded for so long was crumbling before our eyes. As we made our way toward the exit, I could hear the chaos behind us, family members arguing, questioning everything they had ever known. We had disrupted their ritual, and in that disruption, we had found our strength. "Let's go, James," Sarah urged, her hand gripping mine tightly as we dashed toward the front door, the weight of the camera a reminder of our fight for truth. In that moment, I knew we were free. We had taken the first step toward breaking the chains that bound us, and as the door swung open, revealing the light of dawn, I felt a rush of hope. Together, we would confront the darkness that had haunted her family for generations, armed with the truth and the power of our united voices.